What I do is inconsequential. Why I do what I do is I get to shorten people's journeys every day. What I love about our hospitality industry is that it's our mission to make people feel cared for while on their journeys. Together, we'll explore what hospitality means in the built environment, in business, and in our daily lives. I'm Dan Ryan, and this is Defining Hospitality. Today's guest is an accomplished leader focused on the intersection of hospitality, real estate development, and technology. He's a registered architect with over 20 years of experience. He has a proven track record of driving growth and implementing strategic plans, enabling his organization to thrive. He's a trusted advisor and strategic partner to many of the world's leading hotel owners, brands, and consultants. He was named president of the Hardy Group in 2022. He's member of the Urban Land Institute, ISHC, and an avid pickleball player. He's a dedicated family man, enjoys spending time with his wife and 3 kids. Ladies and gentlemen, president of the Hardy Group, Mr. Brent Hardy. Welcome, Brent.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Oh, it's so good to have you on. And it's crazy to think that you've been at the Hardy Group for 15 years, because I've been in the industry for longer than that, almost twice as long, but I feel like you've always been there.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I am. There's a couple Hardys around, so it's easy to get us confused. But I tell everyone, like, I started the company when I was 12 years old, stuffing envelopes, back before email. So I was perhaps an unpaid intern then, but yeah, full time for the last 15 years.
We won't tell anyone about the unpaid intern part, except all of our listeners.
Yeah.
But to start off this, I know that you've been raised in this industry. Your dad and built this great company, and now you're at the helm and steering it on forward in a really exciting and great and innovative way. So before we get into everything, I'd just love to into the first question, which is, how do you define hospitality?
No, that's a great question, and I think for me, when I was starting out as a kid, hospitality was what my dad did. Was hotels, going to hotels, seeing buildings, and that was hospitality. I think as I grew in my career, I realized over time that's really a limiting definition. It's not just the physical thing, hospitality. It's more about the interactions with people and the appreciation for those kinds of moments, whether that's checking into a hotel lobby, experiencing the pool, or just appreciating the value people are doing every day at their job, or even as a guest when you're traveling to a hotel. And so I think it's really a broader just appreciation for those kinds of interactions with people that I think hospitality as an industry does very, very well, and I think a lot of industries perhaps are jealous of, because it's really meaningful and it's greater than any one product or property.
Yeah, and I do believe, just like you, that it is that kind of space between the interpersonal relationship. And so many of the projects that we work on, and just life in general, it's all about that energy between the people. And it's just exciting to work on all these projects, sometimes with you, sometimes not with you, but just in any project where we're building these environments where people come together, exchange ideas, and hopefully have really positive memories.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you think about the memorable experiences in your life, particularly as focusing on hospitality, no one really comes out of it. It's the memories of the experiences, not the. And it's a combination of the place you are, who you're with, what you're doing, and I think that's just one of the great things about the hospitality industry. That's a valuable part of the industry, and you're in meetings, what role you are in the industry. That's really what you lead with to be successful. And I think it's a really great thing that I've kind of come to appreciate. Perhaps I wasn't aware of when I was starting out my career. Now those things really matter, and I think if you lead with that, and that's your focus of what you're doing, eventually you'll find success in this industry.
One of the things I'm always amazed by you and colleagues of yours is to really make these projects come to life. Like you're there at the very beginning. You have a budget with a lot of zeros on it. You have a lot of different stakeholders, and you have to bring it to life, obviously on time, on budget, but without losing sight of that hospitality. And I'm always intrigued by when things start going a little bit sideways, you're like, how do you maintain that level of hospitality for all the stakeholders, but still trying to, be accountable and deliver what you've promised?
Yeah, I mean, it's difficult because there's very no such thing as an easy project. Everything's especially this day and age where there's tight budgets and tight schedules, and people are usually busy, and that leads to stress. I think you've just got to remember that everyone is professional. Everyone's working for the same goal, and a lot of times, if things are getting heated or getting people are getting a little like anxiety over things, you got to kind of pause and calm them down and say, look, we're all trying to get the same goal. And I think so much of what we do as in our business as project managers or development managers is really managing teams. And every team is different, and there's a learning curve to how they best work together, the personalities and the trust. And so a lot of successful teams and projects are because people are able to sort of come together, whether it's owner, architect, contractor, consultant, project manager, and really be effective as a team and work well. And that's a level of combination of professionalism and experience and trust. And sometimes it takes a while. It's harder to earn that or build that on some projects than others. But ultimately, no single person is responsible for any project. It's always a team and group, and you got to be successful together.
Hmm. Let's take an average size project that you'd work on, like
Yeah.
dollar value. What would an average size project be that you would work on?
We're talking about renovation work. It's anywhere
Yeah.
from, I mean, 20 to $80 million on sort of single asset deals. Typically more complicated renovations, redevelopments. Of course, we have part of the business which is sort of programmatic select serve, which is much smaller sort of individual units, and the new build is all over the place. But
Yeah.
yeah, so like a typical renovation, 20 to $40 million, something like that.
Great. So I heard you say a couple of times when we first started talking, and even now, this idea of coming together and building trust, right?
Yeah,
So let's just pick a number of $50 million, just so that we're working. That's a lot of zeros.
yeah.
When you have a team with so many different stakeholders, what are you, as the project manager and really the fiduciary for the owner, correct?
Yeah.
Like, how do you kind of set the table at the outset, or what's an ideal way to get everyone to the table and start that trust building, especially if you haven't worked with designers or buyers or contractors or architects or all the different parts that go into building or renovating a hotel?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no one answer. I think it starts with, on a real practical basis before that team gets together. We'll tell clients we like to be the first hire. Is just making sure that you've got the project set up for success. And oftentimes, especially today, we're seeing because of the COVID and the turmoil in the markets, there's just sort of a new class of owners and investors that are coming into the hospitality market from other spaces, either new first time owners or investors, or they're coming from multifamily or other asset classes. I think part of it is making sure that that plan in place is the correct plan. That's a critical point in time. And then once you've kind of crossed that bridge and you believe that that you're set up for success at a very basic level, then I think building that team with the right understanding of expectations, right people in the right roles, and realizing that in today's environment in particular, no one hits a budget by accident, right? You don't wake up one day and decide, wow, we got lucky, we're on budget. It doesn't happen. I tell everyone, like, we assume we're over budget from the first meeting. And so it's just saying that when we come back later and we're talking about value engineering, we're talking about reselecting certain things. It's not because we don't like the design. It's not because we think someone's done a bad job. It's that we've got to sort of find the middle ground between sort of the visionary, great idea and the cold realities of a limited amount of capital, which is always the case. And so the successful teams are the ones that can come together and find the right ways to marry those two together. And I think that's typically, and the more we can do that collaboratively, constructively, again, that's not just the interior designer, it's also the architect and the contractor, and really leveraging everyone's experience so that we can make those right decisions ideally as early as possible. Then, the better off we'll be down the road, and we're actually starting executing the work and moving the project forward.
Hmm. I'm I'm really intrigued by this idea of the new class of hotel owners, right? Maybe
Yeah,
first time hotel owners. If you were to look at them on a spectrum,
yeah.
is it mostly multifamily folks or other commercial real estate folks, or just people from other other asset classes that want to get into hotels? Like,
Yeah.
what would be the biggest part of that
No,
pie in your experience?
it's all the above. And, I have maybe a personal belief that, one of the things that we're always cognizant of is these new people. I think of things like in a 10-year cycle. Like, what's happening 10 years from now? And so what I try to do today is say, 10 years from now, there's going to be someone in this industry that wasn't here today, right? That's going to have a major impact and a major mark on the industry.
Hmm.
What we're trying to figure out is how do we find that person now before they're successful, before they've got a giant building, before they're a known name, and they're still just that first step out the door. And how can we make sure that we're part of that project, we're part of that team helping them? Because we have a lot to offer, and if we're only the people we know already, then you're missing out on all the future opportunities that you're going to pass you by. So I think what that means for new entrants, what we're seeing really is people, for example, coming out of multifamily who perhaps with some of the headwinds of that market, of the asset class sort of trailing off, and looking at hospitality as a similar sort of still current good investment opportunity. I think we're seeing, interestingly, a lot of people coming out of what I would say is either luxury single family development or the sort of the guys that were Airbnb folks for the last 10 years that have maybe the better parts of that industry that have consolidated and become professional and built a business around. So maybe what started off 10 years ago as their own, 2 units, and now they've got 50 or 100. And looking at hospitality as perhaps the next step in terms of how you grow that to a scale that's more profitable. And that's one part. We also see a lot of people that are new equity investors. Sometimes that's family office, where maybe in the last 10, 15 years, they were investing via some private equity vehicle, fund of funds or some other group that, would sort of take that money. And they're coming in now more on direct basis, I think, because they just like the flexibility and the control, and they just want to do it on their own for a lot of reasons. I think you're also seeing people that maybe who are perhaps my age or our age, that perhaps were working at a firm for the last 10, 12, 15 years and have made enough experience in their career that now with COVID and things changing and some turmoil, they're looking at, well, I'm just going to do my own thing. And,
Hmm.
and I think so. So it's a combination of all those. And so again, what we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do for the company is to say, let's take these people that perhaps today aren't the top five investors. Let's find a way where if we believe in the vision, believe in their passion and their capabilities, how do we support them? How do you become part of that story? I think that's just one thing that we're trying to be careful of. We don't overlook those opportunities because today they're not as apparent as they will be 10 years from
So, whether it's multifamily, family office,
now.
high end residential, single family that are coming into this, is there a theme or a thread that would be the most, like, what's most surprising to these new hotel owners when they roll up their sleeves with you and start getting into hotels?
Yeah, I think it's just the nuance of the industry of how things work, right? And the complexities of an operating agreement, the complexities of what is a brand really doing, and what are they, where do you as an investor need to sort of have your own opinion, or perhaps think contradictory to the brand, and just the pros and cons of all this, all the people that are in the meeting, of how do you really navigate all these conversations. Sometimes we get conflicting information. I'll talk to one brand, they'll say one thing, another brand will say something else. Like how do they analyze or get to the bottom of what's the reality of how they move forward, given either one person's advice that perhaps they don't really know if it's all correct, or even conflicting advice. And so
Mm.
part of what we're trying to do is help them navigate through that chaos or that confusion, using our experience and sort of trying to figure, like, where are you trying to get to? What's the vision? And we'll help you walk that path. And it's not just us, right? I mean, this is also having a really good architect, another great designer, and perhaps some other people that are doing feasibility consulting or helping on the legal side. So it's not just Brent Hardy and the Hardy Group, but we're helping sort of pull those people in the right groups at the right time to sort of allow our clients and investors to get through that process. And we think of a very effective way, a very efficient way, and get the dream built, right? Get the investment in place. And yeah.
So, if I'm hearing you correctly, it's look, there's from operating agreements to all the different brands and the spectrum of brands and like what the vision of everything is. It's like how do we get everything aligned to do it? And so it's a lot. It's a very large yellow onion to
Yeah,
it's the largest of the large yellow onions that you
yeah.
could find at the supermarket. And then what's really surprising to them? Okay, once you've figured out all that, and you're okay, well, you've selected this. This is the vision. This is what we're doing. From the other real estate classes or
Yeah.
commercial real estate classes, as you start, let's say, making sawdust or pouring foundations or demolitioning something to the time that it's done, what surprises them most there, from the actual doing of the physical space?
Um, I would say it depends. I mean, it's where they're coming from. If they're out of a commercial multifamily side of things and they're in the commercial world, it's not drastically different. If they're more from a residential side of things, it's a little more just the scale and the complexity of a hotel, particularly sort of really appreciating the operational and the back of house and how critical that is to get right. For example, most people that come out of other asset classes, like it's not really an operating business, right? It's all triple net leases for the most part. You just sort of rent space. It's the actual daily operations of that. Maybe some leasing on the multifamily side. It's fairly you're kind of a landlord, right? There's really no successful hotel investors, owners, or landlords, right? You've got to be really in top of operations and the physical product really needs to be there to support that and do that correctly. And so I think when they sort of see the complexity, sophistication, and sort of the discussions around the right that type of stuff that if you're in the hotel industry, you never walked into a commercial kitchen before. You never walked to the housekeeping area. Right? You have no appreciation for all the things behind the doors that all the associates do every day. And I think that's the kind of thing where particularly for new owners, we really sort of emphasize like, look, you're gonna have a great bar, you're gonna have a great lobby, great guest room, but equally important is make sure you've got a back of house that is great for the associates, that functions and operates, and we're not going to have 5 times the staff in here as we need to. Really helping that. Really make sure there's a focus from the owner side on those kind of things that perhaps if you're new you don't fully appreciate yet because you've never lived through those kinds of conversations and experiences on the operating side.
And as you've been there for the past 15 years, not including the time before that as an unpaid intern,
Yeah,
um, I'm always intrigued by family businesses and how they can be really successful or not. But I really, obviously I'm talking to you because I see you guys as a very successful multi-generational business. Like what are the things that you learn most from your dad that you're carrying forward as you're leading the company?
yeah. Well, I think there's a few things, and these aren't just all job related. I mean, he's my boss and my father, so it's sort of like it's hard for me to distinguish the two sometimes. But I would say number one is I think you've got to have a passion for the industry, and really, I think that's probably true for a lot of things, but really loving hospitality for all the reasons, for all the crazy reasons and all the sane reasons and all the difficult reasons and all the, it's just you got to really like working here. I think certainly that's something he's passed on to me. And I have bought into 110%.
You
I think
drank the Kool-Aid.
I drank the Kool-Aid. Yeah, yeah. I have a new batch of
Me
Kool-Aid.
too.
And like I'll never be an office developer. Like I don't care. No way. I don't care what it is. I like hotels so much. But I also think one thing I will say about the industry too is that if you go around and you start sort of you've been around for a while, like as you have or I have, just the amount of family businesses that exist in this industry feels like it's just crazy. Like it's more than you probably know when you start digging into the history of companies. Just how many there are. And I think that's probably again it's that passion. It's intergenerational, but also from the family business side of things. I think my father and I are it's really interesting because you hear a lot of horror stories about sort of father son dynamics or daughter this next generation. And I think we have like very little drama at all. We're very different people personality wise. We work really well together. I think it's a combination of just utmost respect for what we do. I mean, he's built a great company for 30 years. I really can't criticize anything. Like far be it from me to tell him he has I've got a better idea. But also I think he's done a great job on his side, not only building the business and getting it to where it is today, but recognizing this is 5 years ago or more, sitting down with his team saying, look, we need to have a plan for the next generation. Right? This company is not just me; it's all of you, right? Me and my peers at that time. So we've been strategic and purposeful building the next generation of leaders and giving them opportunities to succeed and to grow as professionals, and making room for them, right? And to take on those leadership positions, and to tell them that, like, we believe they're successful, and they're going to be as good as their prior peers, or better. And so I think it's that type of leadership that has really helped us be successful beyond just the fact that we get along well together. And I will give my dad a lot of credit to sort of build this business with your name on the door, right? It was the John Hardy Group for a while. Right now we're the Hardy Group, and to sort of like decide one day, like, okay, well, I need to hand it off to you, and you're going to lead it, right? And really back out, and sort of maybe be around, but be an advisor. That, like, I can't imagine doing that. Like, that's crazy. I've got so much, and so I really credit him with sort of driving that narrative, and letting this happen, right? As it has to for any business, you've got to evolve and change. And the second you stay the same you've always been, you're going the wrong direction. So I think it's, we've been lucky in that respect.
And I'm curious because, coming in 2008, was that just before, during, or just after the start of the financial crisis?
I think it was right during the start, if I got my dates right. And it was like right at the beginning of that activity. Maybe it hadn't fully hit yet, but it was in discussion, because we were on a particular project, and Lehman Brothers was the lender on, like, a couple $100 million of debt. So we were all, hope these guys still pay, and they did. Thankfully, I don't know how it happened. I don't know. I wasn't involved in all the financials payments, but that was an interesting few months. But yeah, it all worked out. So here we are.
So describe, like, starting that, coming into the company. Obviously you had experience and you knew people just from being there in the family, but your dad's steady hand there on the helm. And then were there any similarities or parallels that you drew from him in that 2008 experience to how the doors came off in COVID?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. So, I mean, one of the benefits, I think, of being a family company, we're not multinational, conglomerate, is we can do what we want to do. We don't there's no board approval process. We're not a division with masters and lords over us. And so we've always taken the stance in every downturn. This is, I would say, advice for anyone in our business, not just what we do. Is we really kept our entire team intact through every downturn, through both COVID and through the prior financial crisis, with very, very little people leaving the company. 99% people stayed employed during the downturn. I may have tightened the belts a little bit during that time, to sort of, just for cash flow reasons, as anyone did. But we realized, and I think this is what everyone should realize, that the second you start getting rid of good people, you're sort of cutting off your nose to spite your face. Everything is going to come back. Right? You've got to believe that the American economy is resilient, that these sort of downturns are transitory. And if you believe that, then you just got to sort of find a way to get through it, because that once that downturn is over, what's coming is growth, right? And so we were purposeful during COVID and this most recent downturn to sort of make sure that we, with some austerity measures, to put it in some terms, keep the organizational expertise and talent here. So when things began to accelerate, as they did, we were ready to go. We weren't trying to hire people back. And I think that is, I think, the right thing to do for employees. For me, I think that's what they deserve for all their hard work. And I think it's the right thing for the business to sort of be as successful as possible, throughout these kind of business cycles.
Mm. I appreciate that. And another thing I've always appreciated, and I wanted to know, like, get back to the origin story of this, is that the radical innovation program that you guys do. Like,
Yeah.
where did that come from, and what do you as a company feel you gain from organizing that every year?
Yeah. So this is, it's really, I would say, my father's passion project, and it's the kind of, we're actually, surprisingly enough, we're both registered architects. We both went to the same University of Illinois School of Architecture, same program, same building, like 30 years apart. But so we both come from this sort of architecture design background, and I think he just wanted to get. He had a panel HD Expo a number of years ago, and I think he said he wanted to do something. He'd only do it if he could do whatever he wanted to do. He said, fine. And so he said, I want to do this competition. And it just started, I don't know, 15 or so years ago now, or how long it was, it just grew and grew and grew. And it's the kind of thing where there's not a reason for us to do it, right? There's no like, we didn't sit down and calculate an IRR or an ROI, and here's the business case. We're just like, look, it's what excites us. We think it's providing a creativity outlet for the industry that doesn't exist, and we think it's also creating opportunity for us to both sort of maybe force some innovation on the industry and you'll think about things differently, as well as I think the other part of it is providing exposure for some really talented designers that maybe if they weren't, if we didn't give them a platform, wouldn't have had the opportunity to sort of be successful, to be in the industry, and hopefully allow them to sort of over time push the industry to more innovative ideas. So it's I like to say it was some grand plan that we were doing this really just because we wanted to do it and we liked it, and it was something we were happy to invest our time money into, and I think that's still the case today.
I think it resonates with me just because, like, with this podcast, it's, I don't know, I just enjoy doing it. It gives me, it kind of fills some buckets that maybe weren't being filled, or it just satisfies my curiosity in a way, and
Yeah.
it allows me to connect with people in a different way. So I just kudos um, to you guys for coming up with that 15 years ago. And I don't know, maybe in some way back here it was also inspiration for me to think about what are things I could do differently to bring other voices to the forefront to tell
Yeah.
different stories, because I think we all learn and benefit from this as an industry, right? When you talk about the Kool-Aid drinking, like, there's a lot of it, but I feel like there's some, I don't know, real foundational culture that kind of binds us all together. And I don't know, I just appreciate it, and I love seeing what comes out every year. And it was 15 years ago, so would it be safe to say that your dad was able to follow that passion project when you came on, like you freed up some bandwidth so then he could go tinker a little bit, or was
Yeah.
that, or is it
Oh,
separate?
totally. I mean, he like my father's never going to retire in the classical sense, so he'll always be around because that's just again, it's part of his passion and who he is. I mean, at the dinner table, my wife and my mom are like, "Can you stop talking about work?" And we're like, "No, what do you mean? We're just talking. This is how we talk." But but for him, it's definitely one of the things that he's been able to spend time on. In fact, more time on now because we as an organization we have he is sort of sort of handing off responsibilities. Again, some of this stuff's been 5 years in the making. It's not just yesterday. But he's freed up some time to sort of focus on these passion projects, which I think he's earned that. He can have his things he's working on.
Yeah.
And
Well,
he
it's kind of like research and development too, right?
yeah
It's more working on the business than working in the business, if you will.
yeah
Is that safe to say?
yeah, and I think at a certain point in his career, he wants to do things that he wants to do, right? And I think he's earned that, and this is something he's passionate about. And so
Yeah.
we're happy to support him. I mean, it's been a great success, and it's getting better. And who am I to say he can do whatever he wants. He's done.
No, keep him doing it, because I love seeing it every year.
Yeah,
It's always inspiring.
yeah,
Um, so going back to, like, starting in 2008, you got COVID. You got COVID. We went through COVID, and that was those were like pivotal moments for our industry, and we're still dealing with the vestiges of both of those incidents, I would say.
yeah.
Um, as you look in the rear view, like, so that's in the rear view mirror mostly, but like when you look out into the windshield, what's exciting you and the Hardy Group the most as you look into the future?
Yeah, I think we. This is what I'll tell my team. We're a third year company with with I would say the energy of young new leadership, right? And so it's in some ways I think it's the most exciting time I've been in the business since I started because we have all the foundational sort of infrastructure built in terms of scale, excellence, competency, expert, market knowledge with people that are like there's no rules, right? What do we want to do? How can we be great? What's exciting? What do we want to do next? Where can we go? And it's that entrepreneurship and that passion of like, we're not in kind of a box. And so I think what we're looking at least, if my leadership is how do we, again, I always look at 10 years, right? 10 years from now, if we're doing the exact same we're doing now, we've made a mistake, right? And so there's always going to be sort of a core, critical function of what we do in terms of project management, development, management, and advisory work. But what's that thing that 10 years ago we should have known about, right? And how do we find that and become part of that opportunity? I think for us, it's looking at identifying these new entrants to the market that maybe right now, like they're in chaos and they have no idea what they're doing, and they've got a great idea. How do we find them and help them, right? Whatever that means, and push them along, both because I think it's exciting for the industry, and also it's why not be part of that? Why not help that person grow and become part of that from a business perspective, as well as just enjoying success in the industry. And so we're looking at, I think I tell my team, one of my goals is never tell anybody no if I believe they're a great person and have a great idea, right? If the reality is the only way we're saying no because my fee is too high, well, that's a mistake, right? And I think we need to find ways to be creative with how do we, allow people to help them be successful, because I think we have a lot of value we bring to the table, and just leveraging that the right way. And there's no easy answer there. Right? That could be things, whether that's different types of hospitality, whether that's different types of investor owners. We're still exploring that, but I think we're actively sort of thinking along those lines.
As since we've been talking, and just from a previous conversation, I've heard you say enthusiastic, excitement, and excellence, the 3 E's, a lot.
Yeah.
So, like, tell me more about that. Like, and you light up so much when you talk about it. Like, how does that weave into what you guys are doing at the Hardy Group?
Yeah. Well, one of the things we have in our, you log in our corporate intranet for an employee, the first thing you'll see is be nice, be honest, and be the best in the business. And I think for us, that's sort of the crux of how we just choose to run our business and run the company. And so I think, with that really, so the reality is part of that is us, part of my mentorship with people is to make sure, like, look, you have to love this job. You have to love the industry. You have to love what you do. It's difficult work, right? I mean, no one's got a job which is easy. I mean, that's the reality in today's environment. Every project's going to be difficult. Every job has difficulties. But if you don't enjoy, you're not passionate about it, you're just not going to be successful in the long term, right? And I think the reality is, a lot of people, like, you probably need to find something else to do, right? Your time is precious. You only have so much time here. If this job isn't exciting you, like, go find the job that excites you. Maybe it's different role in the organization. Maybe it's a different company. But for us, I think what I lead with, and I hope we try to encourage and foster in our employees, is, look, if you really enjoy this, like, at a core level, like I think I do, I can't hide it, right? You're going to be excellent at it, because I think you just got so much professional pride and sort of personal pride that going that extra step and extra effort, you're not doing it because you have to do it, or you're being told to do it, because, like, that's just what you need to do to be the excellent provider of this service that you are as a professional. And I think that's people with our company, the ones that I think are our leaders, alongside me in the company, I think share that type of vision and perspective.
As you were saying that, I was reminded of something, I guess a little anecdote that Danny Meyer, I think it was in the book Set the Table, that he said he was going to become a lawyer or something. And I think it was his uncle was like, well, do you want to be a lawyer? And he's like, I don't know. It just seems like the thing to do. And his uncle said, you're going to be dead a lot longer than you're alive.
Yeah.
And it was just like, whoa, I better really enjoy and embrace what I'm doing. Otherwise, life is just, it's too short.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it just sounds a little cliche as well. Love what you do, but let it be cliche, because it's 100% true. Life is too short. And if we don't enjoy what we're doing, like, really, what's the point?
Yeah, when you walk into to a client for the meeting for the first time, right? I mean, if you're there and you're like, look, I don't care how difficult this is. I know I know how to get through this, and we've been here before. Like we know the strategy. We're going to work on it. It's going to be difficult, but we're here to help, right? And we know we can get there. I think that that confidence comes with a combination of experience, of maybe a few failures in your background, like you've been through, you've learned the hard way. It's sharing that passion that I'm not just doing this because I'm here. I'm doing this. This is what I love to do as a professional. And I think it's and if you're we are entrusted as project managers with a lot of these clients are taking this entire core investment, all their bosses, all their investors, right? They're saying, here you go, like please help me finish this in 2 years. And so that comes with a certain amount of sort of gravitas. Like, look, like we really, if we mess this up, this person is they are in trouble. And so you
Mm.
have to have a level of trust. They have to have a level of trust with you and us with them, that we're not just going to like leave tomorrow, or like not try hard. And I think that you can try to fake that sort of dedication and passion, but you can't, right? And people I think, when we go to these kinds of meetings, I think whether they can articulate it specifically or not, it's this kind of sort of you know uh, you know, sort of belief and opinion and interaction that they pick up on and resonates with them. And I think that's ultimately, like, if that's what, if they want you to feel as like they would, like if all these ideas you have, like I get it, but that's why you hired us. That's why we're here, right? We know how to separate the problems for tomorrow from the problems from today, right? And we're coaching through that process in some respects.
What's a past, uh, present, or yeah, what's a good past or present example of a really big project where you tackled it with the enthusiasm, the excitement, and I don't know, and just kind of lived and executed it according to your values and got everyone together harmoniously to get it done. Like, what's a good project that showcases that, and just
Yeah,
kind of walk us through it. And I know you love all of your projects equally, but
yeah. Well,
if
I,
you could
I don't
pick
need
one.
to like name names, but like there's times where we walk into a room, and it's our first meeting with the client, perhaps we're even in a sales meeting, right? And we're just like, hey, we're the Hardy Group. Here's what we do. And so much of what you know what's interesting is like the reality, in our business. I'm sure it's true for everyone who's got a technical sort of part of their business, is that whether architect or designer, whoever, contractor, the reality is you're never going to explain at any really detailed level to your client what you do, right? There's no way. They're not an architect. They're not a project manager. They're not a contractor. There's only so much you're ever going to explain to them, because if they knew that already, you wouldn't have to talk to you, right? So, so what I find is the important part about all of this is not to sort of tell them that we're really great at reports, we're great at doing financial statements, like we're great at meeting minutes. Like that's great. We might be great at all those things, and that's great. But so much of what matters is just really communicating. You understand like what is their concerns, like where are they up awake awake at night. And the reality is, typically when I'm in a lot of meetings with clients, either sales meetings or early on in the project, probably the majority that they're talking about is even part of my scope. It's not even my proposal. Like it's not my stuff. It's just making sure that from a strategic level, again, whether it's early in a project, that everyone understands what we're doing and how we're doing it and why. And so I think in some respects, it's being able to sort of put yourself in their shoes and say, like, yeah, I understand that the debt structure and the process of managing that relationship with whoever the debt provider is really critical. Um, like we understand that, we've done it before. Here's how we're going to handle that. Like, it's not in my proposal anywhere, but like that's just the reality of really being entrusted with this amount of responsibility, and finding ways to sort of just sort of take some of the fears away, right? Because it's a lot of, if you're a new hotel investor, you look at this construction development stuff, like it's just like you just have nowhere to go, right? And I think it's very common where we get into projects and working for 6 months, with, kind of trying to figure it out. And it's so often the hardest part is like where the failures usually come is not knowing the first step, right? It's like what to do first, because there's always a million things that you can do. You just checklist is like, 30,000 things on that checklist you could do, right? And it's easy to get overwhelmed if you don't have the experience to know how to parse that apart and say, okay, well, let's focus on these three things first, right? And then we'll do the next three. So part of it is just knowing how to communicate sort of that process in the right way for that person to be successful.
Well,
Yeah.
well, it's one thing communicating. It's another thing being able to pull it out of a client, right? Because I, I love how you said it's like what's keeping you up at night or what's most important to you. Because in everything that goes into any project, it doesn't matter what you do. Um, we're all running full steam ahead trying to accomplish it, but sometimes we're just running full steam ahead, not knowing those two things: what's most important and what's keeping them up at night. And just asking those questions on any challenge or any project, it's just very clarifying, and it automatically reprioritizes everything. But I find sometimes people are timid to ask that question of the client because I should know what it is. I should know what's keeping them up or what's most important. But it's okay to it's okay to ask because
Yeah.
oftentimes that whole way of thinking is so different in your client's mind.
Yeah, and sometimes you get an answer like, "Well, I wouldn't have guessed that," right? Like, "Wow, that's like I'm not worried about that at all," But like,
Yeah,
but they don't know. Like, they've never done this before, so they're new clients. So like, sometimes like part of our job with new clients is like, look, these are the things you need to worry about. These are things you don't need to worry about. Like, yes, they're problems. But like, you know, we'll solve those, right? And so it's like prioritizing like their concerns and helping them walk through that. Especially if you think about it, if you're a new hotel owner, like there's so much like between all the brands and the operators and there's so many different stakeholders and you just sometimes they don't even know like where like what are real problems and what are just like normal things that we'll get through, right? Like, hey, well, we don't have an answer today, but 6 months from now, like that's not going to be our problem. We'll get through it. It's on the agenda. We'll tackle it. And I think prioritization of communicating sort of like where they need to spend their what should they be worried about. Sometimes it's things that I agree with. Sometimes like, well, we've got some ways to manage that, but let's walk through how we resolve that. At least keep you comfortable that we may not have an answer today, but we have a process to get you to that resolution.
it's like eating an elephant one bite at a time.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so I want to go back to you as a well, I could be a 12-year-old, but maybe the experience isn't. But let's go to architecture school,
Okay.
okay? And I'm sorry, the Brent that I'm speaking to right now
Yeah.
magically appear in front of your architecture self in that building that your dad was in 30 years before you.
Yeah.
Um, what advice do you have for yourself?
That's a great question. I would say, and I think this is probably true of a lot of younger people, maybe in their 20s, is I think there's a lot of sort of you're uncomfortable in your own skin in terms of, I think when I was younger, I thought like, man, everyone's got it figured out. I don't know anything. These guys are, everyone's like, man, they know everything. And I don't know where to start. I'm just so confused and I trying to make sure I'm doing the right thing. I think there's a lot of fear of failure at that age without recognizing that, like, look, like 15 years later, 20 years later, I'm like, there's no magic here. It's just, like everyone, it's just hard work and an experience and getting comfortable with just knowing that, look, there's things that I don't know and I'm okay with it because I know how to solve those problems. I know that there's things that I can rely on other people on, right? I don't need to know everything. I need to have the right network and the right support group that, when problems arise, I know the problem. I know how to resolve it. And I think that, for me, it was, I used to think like, oh man, if I just work harder, I figure it all out. I'm like, well, then like, I've appreciated there's only, your time is limited, right? You got to learn to prioritize what you're really doing. And that was a big learning curve of me maybe in my 30s that look, I can't work any harder. Like there's only so many hours in a day. I'm never going to be good at everything.
Yeah.
I got to figure out what I want to be really good at, be really good at it, and then really rely on others to pick up the rest and be able to trust and turn to them, to be part of that. Again, it's part of that team. It's never any one person. Um,
And then there are always those unknown unknowns that you just can't account for and you just
yeah,
got to deal with,
yeah,
right?
and you get comfortable with that. I mean, I think one of the things I think I try to my team is like, look, there's no perfect project. There's going to be problems, right? Like that's just a reality. I don't care how good you are. There's always an issue on something that comes up that maybe you should have known, maybe you can't. That's just a reality of development. It's messy, right? And so I think the trick is just being okay with that. Like you got to live with that uncertainty, and it's just being able, be able to sort of move forward with that being the case, and
Mm.
not get hung up on trying to go in circles solving your problems. You'll just never get anywhere. You got to find a way to move forward with uncertainty, and just be comfortable working in that environment. Otherwise, you're gonna have a you can't work yourself out of that. You just got to sort of find ways to get comfortable with it, and then just know that when those things come up, you're going to be able to manage it properly.
I love it.
Yeah.
Well, Brent, this has just been a wonderful conversation to peer behind the curtain of the Hardy Group. So I want to say thank you so much. And if people wanted to learn more about you or the Hardy Group, how can they learn more?
Well, they can go to our website, which is jhgi.com. That was for the John Hardy Group Inc. So jhgi.com, or my LinkedIn, Brent Hardy. Look me up; it should be a note. And yeah, it's been great. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the time today. It was really some great questions, and I'm glad you have your passion project too.
Yeah, radical innovation. I
Yeah,
got to talk to your dad. We'll compare notes.
absolutely.
But in all seriousness, I know how busy you are onboarding um, all the new hotel owners and all of your existing clients and other clients who own and operate a lot of hotels. But I thank you for your time here. It really means a lot to me and also to our listeners.
No, yeah. Thanks.
And I'd also be remiss if I didn't thank our listeners because they keep listening and more keep listening.
Yeah,
So it just keeps driving me to keep pulling these stories out of
yeah,
people within our industry to just better paint a picture of what's out there and how we all get it done. So thank you to the listeners. And if this changed your thinking on development or hotels or hospitality, please pass it along to someone else. And we're growing every week, and it's all because of you. So thank you, and we'll catch you next time.